Wilds of Eldraine is here, and as for standard sets for the last couple of years, that also means we are getting a couple brand new Commander pre-constructed decks. Specifically for Wilds of Eldraine, we have the green-white deck, Virtue and Valor, and the blue-black deck, Fae Dominion. In today's video, I'm going to be unboxing them so you can see all of the cards individually, new and old, and I'm also going to be giving you just some of my personal opinions on these decks. These decks are also about $40 as of the recording of this video, without having to go into what's in the decks, just based on price. That's fair. That's what we've come to expect from Commander decks, so that's good, but let's go ahead and jump into what's in these and how they play.
Before we get into the specifics about the decks, I want to say that I'm not a huge fan of the new packaging. I don't necessarily like that I have to flip over the box in order to read what the commander is. I like being able to just see on the front of the box what the commander is and what the commander does. That gives me a much better idea on what the deck is trying to do. Yes, all of that information is on the back of the box, but that doesn't seem very smart if you're trying to get people's attention if they're just like browsing at a store or whatever. But what I do like is that they have the little collector booster sneak peeks that they've been doing for the last year or so. Why they only do the 2-card version and not do like an actual collector booster when you're paying $40 to $50 for a deck, I'm not really sure, other than money. But let me know what you guys think about those couple things in the comments. Now let's get into the Virtue and Valor commander deck. The head of this deck is Elivir of the Wild Court, and I actually like the commander quite a bit, much more than the backup commander. It's a green-white deck based around auras, and my main concern with auras over time has just been how easy they are to get rid of and feel like you lost a 2-for-1 because you have to spend the enchantment on a creature or a land or whatever you're attaching it to, and then if it gets removed, well, you just lost 2 cards. The biggest perk about this deck, I think, is the recurability of those auras. There's a lot of auras that bring themselves back, a lot of creatures or spells that can bring them back, so that is a great perk. However, the rest of the construction of this deck is kind of weird. Both of these precons have 39 lands, which just seems pretty high. Now, I will say the mana curve of these couple decks is higher than that of a lot of other precons, and definitely a lot higher than that of what you would probably build if you were building a deck yourself. I would have much rather they cut a couple lands and add a couple more land ramp spells. Like, there's a lot of classic land ramp that is just not in this deck. There's no Rampant Growth, there's no Cultivate, there's no Kodama's Reach, and that seems like a missed opportunity, especially when you consider that this deck has 29 basic lands. That's insane. That's a reoccurring theme of my criticism of precons, is they tend to just not have great mana bases, so that's definitely something that could be improved. But I feel like this one especially was avoidable. Like, being a 2-color deck and the cost of those colors being pretty evenly distributed, I don't think having a bunch of basics in this deck is necessarily problematic, but it would have been nicer to see a couple less lands in the deck overall and a couple more land ramp spells. But overall, I think a lot of the new card designs in this deck are pretty cool, and if you're new to the enchantment archetype, I think it might be a fun one to pick up and try. However, we did just have a enchantment deck in Commander Masters just a couple months ago, and I actually think that precon was a lot better, even though you'd have to spend more money on it unless prices have come down and I haven't been aware of it. And we've also just seen a lot of enchantment decks in the past, and I feel like this one isn't too special or unique. But again, with that said, if you're new to the enchantment archetype, it might be worth giving it a try. But if enchantments are something you've played before, I don't think there's anything special enough about it to make it worth picking up. The other deck is Fae Dominion. Now, Tagwell Duke Splendor is a very cool front commander. Wants you to make a bunch of fairies and then sacrifice them. However, I actually like Alayla Cunning Conqueror, the backup commander, a little bit more because she incentivizes you to play at instant speed, which I feel is more of the classic fairy play pattern. And then goading is also just very, very fun. But I think out of the box, Tagwell is probably the better option. But if you're going to build from scratch, Alayla is probably the more fun build. And overall, I think this deck is constructed much better. Again, 39 lands seems kind of high, but again, the curve is higher than that of the average deck. This deck does have quite a bit of card draw though, so you're probably going to find your lands anyway. So I think the first thing I would do is probably cut 1 or 2 lands. And there are still just a ton of basic lands in this deck. This one has 25, which is a couple less than the other one, but that's still a lot of basic lands. But I'm sure people are bored about hearing my complaints about land bases in precons, so let's focus more on the theme. There's a decent amount of stuff playing at instant speed, which as I said is very classic for the play pattern of fairies, so I like that. And there's a couple game enders that can come in, make your fairies bigger, have some kind of payoffs for having a lot of fairies, which is nice because a lot of fairies are very small creatures, so it's kind of hard to end a game that way. And overall, I think if they were going to make a fairy precon, there aren't very many cards that should be in here that aren't. The biggest one is definitely Bitter Blossom, but it did get a reprint in the Enchanting Tales of Wilds of Eldraine, so there's a very good chance that it's going to come down in price quite a bit and would be a pretty easy upgrade for this deck. Both of these decks had slightly upgraded versions that are played in the most recent episode of Upkeep, which just came out on Friday, and I definitely think that this one performed better and was more interesting. Tribal is also overdone. We've seen a million tribal decks at this point, but fairies are an iconic creature type, and I feel like this does the tribe justice. So if it sounds interesting to you, I definitely think it's a fun deck and worth picking up. Definitely my pick of the two.
thank you guys for checking out this video. If you are planning on picking up either of these pre-constructed decks, let me know in the comments. And also, if there's something about them that's making you hold off and not want to pick these up, let me know about that as well. And let me know if you agree or disagree with my analysis. Make sure you're subscribed. We have lots of other Wilds of Eldraine related content coming out very soon, or just came out recently. I don't know exactly what our release schedule looks like, so make sure you subscribe so you see the new stuff, and also head over to the channel to check out some of our other previous content. We have lots of other awesome Magic the Gathering related stuff coming out soon. We'll see you later.